We've talked a lot about our favorite dragons, our favorite books about dragons. So why not talk about the meaning of the dragon? Good morning, everybody. My name is Rob. This is my mom, Karen.
I
And today we are going to talk about I guess, purpose behind what dragons mean in terms of literature. So, if you guys have watched before, you've seen that we talked about books where dragons are heavily themed. We've gone over stories like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and all that as well, Game of Thrones. But today we're going to talk more about the actual meaning of it. So, if you guys have taken literature classes or English classes, you know that one of the words that we use is trope. And trope is kind of like the purpose behind what we're using. A lot of genres like romance or sci fi have specific tropes, which is what makes them romance or sci fi. So, dragons kind of fall into that as well. They represent many things: power, wisdom, guardianship, but also creation and destruction, and the idea of nature being an untamed force. So I thought we'd kind of go through some of these ideas and see what we think. First off, though, the dragon can be a fierce antagonist, symbol of greed or evil, or it could be the wise, benevolent creature that actually helps. The one feature that comes to mind is Dragonheart, where I think it's a Dennis Quaid film, and he actually works with the dragon, voiced by Sean Connery, and the dragon actually helps Dennis Quaid become a better knight, quote unquote, to basically get his numbers up. And they basically work out this team plan where the dragon pretends to be killed so Dennis Quaid can then go in and get more money. It's a very weird
okay.
idea,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
it's kind of that idea where sometimes a dragon can actually be, I guess, your friend. But let's go into some of those ideas and I'll run to you to see what you think. So, first one is the idea of untamed nature and power. Dragons often portrayed as a force of nature with immense strength and power that can be both creative and destructive. I think we can both agree generally that's a pretty easy one to digest.
hmm
Dragons are usually drawn as large, so they can either destroy, but they can also be that theme of kind of bigger than life, right? So, what do you
Right.
think with that one? What do you think about that idea right there?
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I think about dragons. I mean, I think about them in science fiction and fantasy. I think about the dragon, which he probably wasn't a dragon with King Kong. The other guy, the that used
Oh, you're thinking Godzilla, the
Godzilla,
giant
and was he a
lizard. Yeah.
dragon or a giant lizard? I don't know, but that's what I think of when I think about dragons. I think of them as bigger than life, and they could squash me if they stepped on me.
So, a book I reread recently was Earthsea, and it was a whole series about kind of a fantasy series. And at one point, he meets a dragon, but instead of the typical battle of it, they actually talk out their differences and similarities. And it turns out that this elder dragon who basically runs the dragon, you know, family, he basically talks to the human in a way of, okay, you let me do my thing, I'll let you do your thing. And as long as we don't really run into each other, I'm not going to go out of my way to hurt you. And I would respect for you to do the same to me. And it's a very
Wow.
interesting kind of conversation. And at one point, I think that dragon actually gets him out of a mess that he almost is killed in. So you kind of get this idea of kind of how nature would be. And this goes into our second one as guardian or protector.
hmm
A lot of cultures throughout the world, especially in Asian cultures, the dragon is actually looked upon as a protector, as part of the family. A lot of cultures there actually believe dragons are physically part of their family. That's where the rulers came from. So when they have the dragons, it's actually there for a purpose. It's there because it's their grandfather, it's their grandmother, it's the ancients basically of their people.
Interesting.
And it's a very interesting idea because a lot of times what we grew up with is the dragon being, strictly just an evil beast that you have to kill. But when you look at it from the purpose of that, what do you think? What do you think of that when you look at it from the idea where a culture looks at the dragon as one of their own, basically?
I think it's interesting. I like who do we look like? Do we look like those dragons? If they're one of the family, like who do they take after? I mean, that's what I think. I think it's interesting, and I think it's a great way to integrate the fantasy with the real and tell stories around it. It feels like very much a story um, thing. I don't know.
It really is. It really is, and I love that idea where they truly they say it is one of them, and that is a really interesting idea.
Hmm.
On that same note, though, for the next one, a lot of times it is a metaphor for the human psyche or human nature, basically a battle between the conscious and subconscious.
Hmm.
So, what I have down here was they are the duality between what your brain believes and what your, I guess, soul or heart believe. And it's kind of that balance between yourself of creation and destruction. And this kind of goes into stuff we've talked about before with, let's say, like a self help book, where you use that to kind of figure out what works better for you. Um, and it's very interesting to think, and especially I know you've done shows with people about like mental health, for instance. It's interesting to think of the dragon as kind of that barrier between the two. It not only equals the good, but it also equals the negative of your internal process, right?
Yeah.
That's one I've never heard before until recently, and I'm kind of curious what you thought on that because I know you are kind of.
Yeah, I've never heard of it that I've never heard anything in any mental health conversations that the dragon sits between. Is it kind of sanity and insanity, or mental or
I
wellness
mean, I guess
and
in a
not
sense
well?
you can say it's basically what your common sense would do and what your positive side would do versus what your maybe irrational side would do if it's a a fight or flight type of deal.
Right.
But it's interesting because if you think about it, the dragon it's physically kind of that too, right? It's kind of like it has both sides. If it gets too frustrated, it'll just kind of attack.
Right.
But if it uses its smarts, it may not just jump, to that conclusion. So a couple more we have here. We talked about already the symbol of greed and evil, and that's usually the Western tradition. So if you read a lot of books like Beowulf or Sir Gawain and the Green Knight,
Right.
those dragons are strictly something you have to kill to save your
So
land.
so if I left my jewelry box open, right, and the
Yes,
dragon,
exactly. Yeah, it's the dragon that you don't want to leave your good. And then lastly here, a figure of wisdom and transformation. I love this too. This kind of goes with the psyche what we were talking about a second ago. A lot of times dragons portray the wise, ancient culture, and they have a lot more knowledge than we do. So it's kind of both a blessing and a curse in a way for those who look for it because you want to look for the answers, but you also have to realize when you look in places that might not be so comfortable, you may learn things that might also
mhm,
not be so comfortable as well. So
right,
dragons kind of play that role of I'm happy to give you that knowledge, but just beware that, as cliche as it sounds, with great power comes
right.
great responsibility. The quote that we all love to hate. So I think overall, this is kind of what I take away from the dragon is that it really does mean more than just the dragon. So while a lot of people will, read something like Game of Thrones for the visual, I think next time you read it, look at the dragon as more of a not just an artificial
Right.
creation, but something that actually is meaningful, that might actually mean something deeper. And then maybe read it again and go, oh, now the book has a whole nother meaning.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
And that's why we loved having these conversations, Rob, because we look at these things. I look at these things differently when you bring this to the table like this, because for me, a dragon is a dragon is a dragon. I mean, I never really thought that there were different tropes around this. And
yeah,
so very, very interesting. And so, you've got fantasy books in the next
we
chapter.
do. We actually have the entire Hobbit, Lord of the Rings collection, amongst others. We have a really cool copy of Game of Thrones as well. But amongst that, we have just some other really cool fantasies as well, along with our sci fi, thriller, romance, you name it. We probably got something for you.
So here's just a thought. The next time you read a fantasy with a dragon in it, think to yourself, what does this dragon mean? Not just How do we kill it? Right?
Exactly. I like that. Perfect.
Well, somebody very smart wrote that down for me to say, so that must have been you, I think.
Oh, I guess so, maybe.
um, So make sure you go check out the Next Chapter Bookstore. It's a used bookstore, which means it's gently used, and it just means that other people have touched that book, other people have um, enjoyed the book, and I love the history. I know we talk about this all the time. I love the idea of the history behind it. Somebody else was there, so go and check it out. And if you have a topic that you would like us to discuss and have Rob do a little bit of research on, let us know in the comments, and we will make sure that it gets on the schedule. Anything else that you want to share, Rob?
It's kind of like when you go out and you adopt a puppy or a kitten, you're bringing this book back home to your house and giving it a new lease on life, so to speak.
Yeah,
So,
love that. Love that. So, everyone, thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week. Go out and give somebody an awesome day. Goodbye, everyone. Sorry.